Neha Sharma, Arjun Malhotra, and her parents, Rajesh and Sunita Sharma, thought they were just a family navigating the joys and challenges of a pregnancy. But behind closed doors, a single lie about a baby's gender would ignite obsession, betrayal, and a tragedy that would destroy their lives forever. Please subscribe for daily new update of crime story and watch till end. The Sharma family home in New Jersey stood on a quiet street, lined with tall trees and neatly parked cars. It was the kind of neighborhood where nothing unusual ever seemed to happen. Early morning sunlight touched the windows gently, and the house looked warm and welcoming from the outside. Inside, the walls carried memories of another country. There were framed pictures from India, religious symbols placed carefully on shelves, and the smell of spices that never really left the kitchen. For Neha Sharma, this house was more than just a place to stay. It was where she had grown up, where she felt safe, and where she believed her life could slow down for a while. Neha had come back to her parents' home during her pregnancy because she felt overwhelmed. Life in the United States had not turned out the way she imagined after marriage. She felt lonely in a new city, far from people who truly understood her. Her parents welcomed her without question. They believed this phase would pass and that things would become normal again once the baby arrived. To them, their daughter looked tired but hopeful. They did not notice the fear that quietly lived behind her smile. A few days later, Arjun Malhotra arrived from Chicago. He told everyone it was just a short visit. He carried expensive gifts and tried to appear calm and respectful. To Neha's parents, he looked like a responsible husband who cared for his wife. He moved around the house confidently, as if it belonged to him too. Yet something about his presence changed the air inside the home. The house that once felt peaceful now felt heavy, as if the walls were listening. Neighbors saw the couple together and assumed nothing was wrong. They noticed Arjun helping with groceries and Neha walking slowly because of her pregnancy. From the outside, everything appeared normal. No one could imagine that the calm was fragile and temporary. Inside the house, Neha avoided being alone with Arjun for too long. She focused on small tasks and spent time with her mother, believing that staying close to family would keep her safe. At night, when the house grew quiet, Neha lay awake, thinking about the future. She hoped that becoming parents would change things between her and Arjun. She believed that once the baby was born, anger and pressure would fade away. The house around her felt familiar, yet her heart carried unease. She did not know that this place, filled with childhood memories and parental love, would soon become the center of a terrible crime. The Sharma home had always been a symbol of protection and stability. It had survived years of distance, migration, and struggle. But now, without anyone realizing it, that same home was standing at the edge of a nightmare. What seemed like an ordinary family visit was quietly moving toward a moment that would change everything forever. Arjun Malhotra had built his life carefully on the outside. He worked a stable job, dressed well, and spoke confidently about modern values. To friends and co-workers in the United States, he appeared open-minded and practical. But beneath this surface lived a mindset shaped by pressure, pride, and deep-rooted beliefs he never truly questioned. From a young age, Arjun had been taught that a man's worth was measured by legacy. In his mind, that legacy had only one shape. Long before Neha became pregnant, Arjun imagined himself as the father of a son. This thought was not just a hope, it was an expectation. He believed a son would carry his name forward, strengthen his position in society, and prove his success as a man. These ideas stayed buried for years, rarely spoken aloud, but they controlled his thinking silently. When Neha told him she was pregnant, his excitement was tied less to becoming a parent and more to fulfilling this belief. As the months passed, Arjun became restless. He searched the internet late at night, reading articles and forums about family lineage and male heirs. His search history slowly changed from general parenting advice to specific topics about gender, inheritance, and control within marriage. Each article he read reinforced his obsession. He convinced himself that his future happiness depended on one outcome only. Neha noticed the change in him, but did not fully understand its depth. Arjun began asking questions repeatedly. watching her reactions closely. His behavior became controlling in subtle ways. He wanted to know every medical detail, every appointment result, every small sign. When he felt unsure, his calm attitude would slip, replaced by tension and silence. These moments passed quickly, but they left marks on Neha's mind. Arjun's obsession was not loud or obvious. It lived in his thoughts, growing stronger with time. He compared himself to other men he knew, imagining their families and children. The idea of failure haunted him. In his world, having a daughter felt like losing something important, even though he never said this openly. He told himself that his feelings were logical and justified. When Neha moved to her parents' home, Arjun felt a loss of control. Distance made his thoughts darker. He replayed memories and imagined scenarios that fed his anger. By the time he planned his visit to New Jersey, his mind was already filled with suspicion. He told himself that he needed answers, and whatever the truth was, he deserved to know it. Arjun did not see his thoughts as dangerous. He believed they were natural. But slowly, his obsession began to shape his actions. What started as a desire turned into pressure. Pressure turned into anger, and anger waited quietly for the right moment to explode, hidden behind a calm face and controlled behavior. Neha learned the baby's gender during a routine medical checkup. The moment stayed heavy in her mind long after she left the clinic. It was not fear of motherhood that troubled her, but fear of her husband's reaction. She knew Arjun well enough to understand that this information carried more weight than it should. The doctor's words echoed in her thoughts as she drove home, her hands resting on her stomach, trying to protect the life growing inside her. For days, Neha said nothing. She moved carefully, thinking about her next step. Her past experiences with Arjun had taught her that honesty did not always bring safety. She remembered moments when small disagreements turned into silent punishment and emotional pressure. This time, the risk felt much bigger. She believed that the truth could put her peace, and possibly her safety, in danger. When she finally told Arjun the baby's gender, she chose to lie. She said the baby was a boy. The words came out calmly, but her heart raced. She watched his reaction closely. Arjun appeared satisfied, almost relieved. His mood changed instantly. He became more attentive and less tense. To Neha, this confirmed what she had feared all along. The lie felt wrong, but it also felt necessary. In the weeks that followed, Arjun's behavior shifted. He started making plans for the future with unusual confidence. He spoke about education, family pride, and success, all centered around the child he believed would meet his expectations. Neha listened quietly, feeling trapped between guilt and survival. Every day, the lie grew heavier, but she convinced herself it was temporary. She planned to deal with the truth later, hoping time would soften Arjun's mindset. Still, Arjun's satisfaction did not last long. Small doubts began to appear. He started asking indirect questions and paying close attention to medical visits and reports. Neha became more cautious, hiding documents and changing routines. She felt like she was living under constant observation. The home no longer felt safe, even when Arjun was calm. The lie that was meant to protect her slowly became a source of anxiety. Neha struggled with sleepless nights, worrying about what would happen if the truth came out. She tried to reassure herself by focusing on her parents' support and the physical distance she had created by staying at their home. She believed that being surrounded by family would reduce the risk. Arjun, however, felt something was wrong. He could sense that information was being kept from him. His thoughts returned again and again to the same question. Instead of discussing it openly, he began searching for proof on his own. Suspicion replaced trust. What Neha saw as a protective lie, Arjun began to see as betrayal. This gap between fear and obsession grew wider each day. Neha hoped the lie would fade into the background once the baby arrived. Arjun believed the truth would eventually reveal itself. Neither of them understood that this single lie had already set events in motion that could not be stopped. During his stay at the Sharma home, Arjun began to notice small details that disturbed him. A misplaced medical bill, a folded ultrasound report, a glance that seemed too careful. Each tiny sign became evidence in his mind. His calm demeanor slowly eroded as suspicion consumed him. He no longer saw Neha as the wife he had married. She had become a puzzle he needed to solve, a secret he believed was being kept from him. Every corner of the house, every drawer, every shelf seemed to hold clues that would confirm or deny his fears. One evening, while Neha was resting, Arjun moved quietly through the rooms. He pretended to be relaxed, but his mind raced with questions. He was careful not to draw attention, but the tension in the house was palpable. His obsession with the child's gender had grown so strong that it began to distort his perception. Ordinary household items now carried significance. A hidden envelope, a slightly bulging folder, a medical pamphlet tucked away in a drawer, all of them became evidence of betrayal in his eyes. When he finally found the hidden medical papers, something inside him shifted. The documents revealed the truth that Naka had tried to protect. The baby was not a boy. For Arjun, it was as if the foundation of his life had cracked. He could not reconcile the love he had once felt with what he now perceived as a lie. His thoughts became consumed by anger, betrayal, and humiliation. What had started as suspicion transformed into certainty that Naka had deliberately deceived him. Arjun's mind spiraled. He replayed every moment, every conversation, searching for proof that he had been lied to from the beginning. In his mind, the lie was not just about the baby, it was about trust, control, and respect. He told himself that if he did not act, the betrayal would continue, that the family's honor, his future, and his expectations for life were all at stake. Rational thinking had no place in his thoughts anymore. Everything became colored by rage. Neha remained unaware of how close danger had crept into her room. She rested in the familiarity of her childhood bedroom, believing she was protected by the walls that had once given her comfort. She thought the presence of her parents and her careful handling of the lie would keep Arjun's darker impulses at bay. Yet the quiet house now felt different, as if tension had settled over every corner, thick and suffocating. That night, Arjun's obsession reached its peak. He could no longer contain the storm of emotion building inside him. The anger, once simmering, now demanded release. His mind rationalized the unthinkable, that Neha's lie could not remain unpunished, that he needed to reclaim control over the life he believed was slipping away. In his perspective, there was no turning back, no way to undo what he believed had been done. The quiet tension of the house masked the violent intention that had already formed, waiting for the moment it could be unleashed. By the time the house slept, the line between love and rage had vanished in Arjun's mind. What was once a family home filled with memories and safety had become a stage for a tragedy that would unfold in the coming hours. In his obsession with truth and control, he was preparing to take an action from which there would be no return. In the early hours of the morning, the Sharma house was silent. Outside, the street was empty, and the faint glow of the streetlights cast long shadows on the walls. Inside, everything appeared normal. Neha's parents slept peacefully in their room, unaware that the quiet they trusted was deceptive. The house, usually a sanctuary filled with warmth and the smell of home-cooked meals, had become a place of lurking danger. Every sound, every creak of the floorboards, went unnoticed. But for Arjun Malhotra, each movement was part of a terrifying plan that had been forming in his mind for weeks. Arjun moved carefully, almost methodically. He had rehearsed the scenario in his mind countless times, justifying each action as necessary. His thoughts were consumed by the sense of betrayal he felt, by the belief that the lie about the baby's gender was a personal affront he could not ignore. In his mind, control was the only solution, and he had convinced himself that he could restore it by taking action immediately. Neha lay in her childhood bedroom, exhausted from the emotional weight of the past weeks. The room, filled with memories of her youth, offered no protection now. Familiar objects, the old dresser, the framed photographs, the soft rug by the bed, suddenly felt like silent witnesses to what was about to happen. She had believed that her parents' presence nearby would keep her safe. But Arjun's obsession had grown too strong, and distance no longer mattered. The attack was swift and brutal. There was no struggle, only the cold efficiency of someone who believed he was carrying out justice. The life of Neha and her unborn child was ended within the span of moments. The quiet of the house, once comforting, was shattered by an act so violent that it would leave permanent scars on everyone connected to it. Arjun did not pause, did not consider the consequences beyond the immediate satisfaction of reasserting his perceived control. By the time the first signs of dawn touched the windows, the house was silent again, as if nothing had happened. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, hiding the horror that had occurred inside. Neha's parents began to stir, unaware that their world had changed forever while they slept. The smell of the morning coffee, the usual sounds of breakfast preparation, all seemed out of place now. Every familiar routine had been broken, replaced by an unshakable sense of loss. Arjun attempted to compose himself, as if nothing had occurred. He moved through the house, creating a facade of normalcy. But the reality could not be hidden. The evidence of his actions was present in the stillness, in the absence of life that had once filled the rooms with warmth and sound. The house, a place meant to nurture and protect, had become a crime scene. The tragedy of that night would later shock neighbors, friends, and authorities alike. What seemed like a normal visit, a temporary stay for a young couple, expecting a child, had ended in irreversible loss. The act itself was not only the culmination of obsession and rage, but also a stark reminder of how fragile safety can be when it is assumed rather than ensured. In a matter of hours, a home built on love and memory had been transformed into a place of grief and horror, and nothing would ever be the same again. After the tragedy unfolded, Arjun Malhotra tried to cover his actions with a story that seemed plausible on the surface. He claimed that Neha had suffered complications due to her pregnancy and that she had collapsed unexpectedly. To anyone hearing the story for the first time, it sounded like a medical emergency, the kind that could happen even in the safest of homes. He acted with practiced calmness, calling emergency services and attempting to appear concerned and composed. For a brief moment it seemed as though his plan to mask the crime might work. Paramedics arrived quickly, responding to Arjun's call. They moved efficiently, checking Neha and assessing the situation. But soon, the signs did not match the narrative he had presented. Physical evidence suggested trauma that could not be explained by a natural complication. The team noticed marks and injuries inconsistent with his story, and the timing of events raised questions. Arjun's carefully constructed version of reality began to crack under the scrutiny of trained eyes. Neha's parents, just a few rooms away, sensed immediately that something was wrong. The calm of the morning had been shattered by a feeling that could not be ignored. When they saw the paramedics' expressions and noticed the unusual presence of law enforcement called in for assistance, their worst fears began to take shape. The comforting routine of their home had vanished, replaced by confusion, panic, and disbelief. Their daughter, who had returned to them seeking safety and care, had been placed in mortal danger under their own roof. Investigators arrived soon after, quickly taking control of the scene. They began documenting the evidence, moving systematically through each room. What had seemed at first like a tragic accident quickly revealed itself as something far more sinister. The hidden documents, the signs of struggle, and the inconsistencies in Arjun's story pointed to deliberate action rather than misfortune. The police realized that the crime had been premeditated, planned and executed with chilling efficiency. As the investigation unfolded, the neighborhood, previously unaware of any tension inside the Sharma home, started to grasp the gravity of the situation. Friends, neighbors, and distant relatives were shocked by the reality that such a violent act could occur in a house so full of life and tradition. The quiet streets of New Jersey had been the backdrop to a tragedy that seemed unimaginable, and the ripple effect of fear and grief began to spread. For Neha's parents, the realization was devastating. Their home, a place of sanctuary and protection, had been violated in the most personal way possible. They were left not only mourning the loss of their daughter and unborn grandchild, but also confronting the painful understanding that someone they had welcomed into their lives had betrayed them completely. The grief was compounded by shock, disbelief, and a sense of helplessness. Arjun, meanwhile, maintained a facade of innocence, but the cracks in his story were widening. Each new piece of evidence that investigators uncovered further undermined his narrative. His attempt to control the situation through deception had failed. What had seemed like a temporary escape through a false story now became the starting point for the unraveling of his freedom and reputation. In trying to hide the truth, he had set in motion a process that would soon reveal the full horror of his actions to the world. The events of that morning marked the beginning of the end for Arjun's carefully constructed image. The layers of deceit he had relied on could not withstand the methodical work of investigators, and the story of what truly happened in the Sharma home slowly began to emerge, shocking everyone who had believed in his outwardly calm and respectable persona. The investigation into Neha's death quickly turned from questions into a trail of evidence that pointed unmistakably toward Arjun Malhotra. Police and forensic teams combed the Sharma house from top to bottom, documenting every detail, photographing every corner, and collecting anything that could tell the story of what had really happened. What shocked investigators most was not just the brutality of the crime, but the cold calculation that had led up to it. The hidden medical documents, carefully tucked away by Neha, were found exactly where she had tried to keep them safe. They revealed the truth about the baby's gender and exposed the lie that had triggered the tragedy. Digital evidence also played a key role in the case. Arjun's search history, phone records, and messages showed an obsession that had been growing long before the fatal visit to New Jersey. Searches related to gender preference, family honor, and controlling behavior painted a disturbing picture of a mind consumed by a single idea. Investigators realized that this was not a crime of passion that erupted in the moment. It was premeditated, fueled by weeks of anxiety, anger, and obsessive thoughts. Each piece of digital evidence connected Arjun to the crime in a way that left little room for doubt. Neighbors and friends were interviewed, and their accounts created a fuller picture of Arjun's behavior in the days leading up to the murder. They described him as tense, unusually attentive to details about Neha's pregnancy, and increasingly impatient whenever the topic of the child's gender came up. The seemingly normal couple that everyone had admired was now revealed to be living a tense and secretive existence, one that few outside the house could have imagined. The forensic evidence inside the home told an equally damning story. There were traces of a struggle in Neha's bedroom, small but significant. The absence of any signs of forced entry suggested that the attacker was someone she knew and trusted. Investigators pieced together a timeline, noting that the attack had occurred in the early hours of the morning when everyone else was asleep. The house, a place that had once represented safety and family, had become the site of a violent betrayal that left no chance for intervention. As the police gathered their evidence, Arjun's story began to unravel completely. The inconsistencies in his account, combined with the clear forensic and digital proof, left him without plausible explanation. Attempts to blame a medical accident collapsed under scrutiny, and investigators began to prepare charges that reflected the full severity of his actions. The community that had once welcomed him with admiration now saw him as a dangerous and calculating man, someone whose obsession had destroyed innocent lives. The revelations shocked the Sharma family and the wider Indian American community in New Jersey. People struggled to understand how a single lie about a baby's gender could escalate into such extreme violence. The case became a cautionary tale about obsession, control, and the dangers of outdated beliefs when mixed with unchecked anger. It was a story that rippled far beyond the walls of the Sharma home. A story that forced neighbors, friends, and relatives to confront the fragility of trust and the unpredictable consequences of human emotion. By the time Arjun was arrested, the evidence against him was overwhelming. The combination of physical, digital, and testimonial proof left no room for doubt. What had begun as a quiet suspicion about a hidden truth had escalated into a full-scale investigation that revealed the depths of his obsession. The world outside the Sharma home now knew the grim reality. A man's fixation on a child's gender had led to a devastating and irreversible crime, leaving grief and shock in its wake. The arrest of Arjun Malhotra marked the beginning of the slow, painful process of reckoning for the Sharma family. Neha's parents, who had returned to their routine only to be confronted by tragedy, now faced the unbearable task of understanding what had happened within the walls of their own home. Every corner of the house carried memories of Neha's childhood, now overshadowed by grief. They struggled not only with the loss of their daughter and unborn grandchild, but also with the realization that someone they had trusted implicitly had committed the most unimaginable betrayal. In the weeks that followed, the case dominated local news and social media. Journalists highlighted the chilling nature of the crime, how a lie about a baby's gender, told out of fear, had spiraled into an act of violence that ended lives. Discussions emerged about outdated societal pressures, gender biases, and the extreme consequences of obsession. Many in the Indian American community reflected on how deep-rooted beliefs, when mixed with control and anger, could destroy families. The story became a grim reminder that no home is immune to danger when personal obsessions go unchecked. Arjun remained in custody, facing multiple charges, including murder and premeditated violence. Court proceedings revealed the details investigators had uncovered: the hidden documents, the timeline of events, and the obsessive behavior that had escalated over weeks. Psychologists testified about the dangerous mindset that can develop when personal expectations become a measure of worth. Friends and relatives struggled to reconcile the image of the man they once knew with the actions he had taken, realizing that outward appearances often hide darker truths. For Neha's parents, the healing process was slow and filled with sorrow. They focused on preserving memories of their daughter's life, her laughter, and the moments she had shared with them before tragedy struck. Friends and extended family gathered around, providing support, but the absence of Neha and the unborn child was a void that could never be filled. Every milestone, every family gathering, now carried the shadow of what had been lost. The community, too, began to learn from the tragedy. Awareness campaigns about domestic tension, controlling behavior, and mental health started taking shape. The story of Neha and her unborn child served as a painful but important lesson about the consequences of ignoring warning signs and the need for support systems in situations of domestic stress. What had been a private family tragedy became a public reminder of the fragility of life when fear and obsession take over. Arjun's trial was swift, given the overwhelming evidence against him. He was convicted, sentenced to life imprisonment, and stripped of any illusion of freedom. In court, the focus was on the lives lost and the irreversible damage caused. Legal experts emphasized that justice had been served, but justice could not restore the family or the future that had been stolen. Years later, the Sharma family continued to live with the memory of Neha and the child she never held. Their story remained a somber warning of how quickly obsession and control can turn love into tragedy. The house in New Jersey, once a place of comfort and warmth, was now a silent reminder of that fateful decision, a testament to the consequences of lies and unchecked obsession. In the end, the tale closed with quiet reflection. The loss of life, the exposure of dangerous beliefs, and the permanence of choices made in anger and fear. The tragedy of Neha and her unborn child became more than just a story. It became a lesson, a caution, and a haunting memory that would not be forgotten. Justice had been served, but the emptiness it left was a reminder that some losses could never be repaired.